Hi, how are you? So my name is Courtney Schoenfeld, and I passed the course subjects quite a while ago, and I've been tutoring for it for many years now, and tutoring for other exams as well. And tonight I'd like to go over some content for social studies because we did math last week. So I thought we'd do social studies today because I tend to focus on those two because those two are the two that people struggle with the most. So before we get started on the content, let me show you some data that you might find interesting. If you go to Google and type in EPP passing rates, and I do 2023 because it seems to come up right, even though the range is 2019 through 2024. You can see this is by TEA. So you click on it. Takes a little minute to open. It's slow today. This is the data that the state puts out on how many people pass the test on their first attempt. So you can see this is the 5-year pass rates, and it says first attempt, right? So let me make this a little bigger because this is tiny. So you can see for core subjects EC through 6 ELAR, the most passive recent data is 2023 to 2024, and this is the percent passing rate. So that's what we're looking at. We always want to look at the 900s because this is the current test. The 800 was the old test that they phased out. That's why they only have the data through that year. They phased it out a few years ago. So you can see 87% of the people that take it the first time pass it. So that's pretty good. For fine arts, it's 80%. For math, which we talked about last week, it's 77%, a little bit lower. For science, which we did a couple weeks ago, I believe, 83%. And then you can see social studies is the lowest at 74%. So about a fourth of the people that take the social studies test don't pass it the first time. So it's the one that people struggle with the most out of the 5 subject areas, right? And it is tough because it's government, economics, history. It's a lot of different domains within social studies, right? So it's not just history, it's a little bit of everything. So I'll show you. It's social science instruction, history, geography, economics, as well as government and citizenship. So one thing you should do if you haven't already, I highly recommend this, is go to Texas NESINC manual. This is the website where you go to register for your test and where you'll get your score report whenever your scores come out. But it's also the website where they post the free preparation manual, right? They call it a preparation manual. I would call it more like a starting guide. So you click on prepare, and I'll tell you why I call it a starting guide, because it's got real vague information. It doesn't really have what you need to know to pass. For example, let's click on overview and exam framework. You can see social studies is 50 minutes and there's 40 questions. But let's look at the competencies for social studies. So let me scroll, find social studies. You can see it says understands the social studies content and performance standards that constitute the TEKS, but it doesn't tell you what those things are. Understands the vertical alignment of the social sciences in the TEKS from grade level to grade level, including prerequisite knowledge and skills. Again, it doesn't tell you what that is. Understands and uses social studies terminology correctly. So you can see it's got vague information. It doesn't have detailed information, but I still recommend you look at it because these sample questions are super similar to the questions you're going to see on the test. So if you haven't done this yet, look at these sample questions because you really don't get any closer to the real test than this. So you definitely, in my opinion, need some type of book or study course to be able to pass this test. I don't think you're going to pass with just this free resource unless you do what I did when I wrote the book. So I'll show you what I did when I wrote my study guide. So we go to overview and exam framework. I would go to the first competency and I would read this right here. And then I would do research on it. So I would look up what are the basic linguistic concepts and developmental stages in the acquisition of oral language. And I'd read a few sources on Google, right? Put it in my own words, even look at books if I need to, put it in my own words, paraphrase everything, right? And put it in a study guide. So if you want to take the time to do that for every single descriptive statement, then you could do that and study like that. But most people prefer to get a book or a course and have it done for them, right? Because this, you can tell this would be very time consuming because look how many there are, right? So it takes me a really long time to write my study material because I do it for every single descriptive statement for every single subject area. Plus I make videos that go with it. So I thought today, because free tutoring, I only have about 25 to 30 minutes because I have some other tutoring tonight. I thought we would do competency 1 because we can finish competency 1 in the prescribed time, but the other competencies mostly take longer. So like a few weeks ago, I did history, but we only did part of history. But tonight we can do all of this competency. So that's going to be really good. So you can see everything I do is aligned to these descriptive statements that I was showing you, which means it's very similar to what you're going to see on the real test. The benefit of using my material compared to other programs is that I've taken the test and I only write material for Texas. So I align it closely to the Texas exams. I'm not writing stuff for other states like some of these big companies are, where I put stuff on there that's on other tests. I only have the stuff that's on the Texas exam. So we need to be familiar with the TEKS. We don't have to memorize them. If you don't have my course, you can just Google TEKS and it will come up and you can read through it, right? So you want to know approximately what's expected at each grade level, but not memorizing it. So at kindergarten, the focus is on self, home, family, and classroom. Makes sense because in kindergarten, they're very egocentric as they're supposed to be. You can see in first grade, the focus is on the student's relationship to the classroom, school, community, and citizenship. Second grade, the focus is on students' local community and accomplishments of important people, as well as the history of the community, state, and nation. Third grade, focus on how diverse individuals impacted their communities and the world. Fourth grade is Texas history. Fifth grade is U.S. history from 1565 until the present. And sixth grade is focused on studying people, places, and societies of the contemporary world. So you can see the breakdown for kindergarten through sixth grade. Next, we need to talk about vertical alignment. So vertical is up and down, as we know, right? And so it's connecting the content as a student progresses through the grade levels. What they learn in higher grades builds on what they learned in lower grades. So for example, in kindergarten, students learn that Stephen F. Austin is considered the father of Texas. But in fourth grade, they learn more detail about his life, accomplishments, and what he contributed to the state. So they would learn that he was an impresario, that he brought people to Texas to settle, things like that. So it'd be a lot more detailed, and it would build on what they learned in kindergarten. There's different domains within social studies, right? The terminology. So we have history, which we know is events and people of the past. Economics, studying work, value of money, how countries produce goods, services, and create jobs. Government, how we create and enforce laws. Citizenship, traits of responsible members of society. Culture, way of life. Science, technology, and society, that's self-explanatory. And social studies skills, skills useful in learning social studies, including careful reading and metacognitive strategies, which are those strategies we use to evaluate our own thinking. Like when we take notes, when we ask ourselves, did we understand? When we look at different sources and check for authenticity, things like that. We're evaluating our own thinking. So not looking for other sources, sorry. When we're evaluating our own thinking, that's metacognitive strategies. Checking for authenticity is different. So that's metacognitive, evaluating your own thinking. Piaget stages of cognitive development. I'm glad we're talking about that tonight because it comes up on every subject of the test, right? So it's not just going to be in social studies, you're going to see it in language arts and math and things like that. So it's super important that you learn this. But you can see there's been entire books written about Piaget and stages of cognitive development. but I make it pretty brief, right? We're just going to do a quick little explanation for each stage, which is enough that you need to know for the purpose of the test. So the sensory motor stage is birth to 2 years old. They put everything in their mouth. They learn from their senses and from movement. So that's why babies put everything in their mouth. That's how they learn. Then you have the pre-operation stage. Usually they're 2 to 7 years old. They're very egocentric. Everything's focused on them. They're slowly starting to decenter, understand things from other people's point of view. They believe in animism, symbolism, and moral realism. So animism means they think everything has the trait of living beings. So if they break a toy, they might think that they hurt it, and they might cry that they think they hurt the toy because they think it's alive. Symbolism, something's a symbol of something else, and moral realism, they think everybody has the same moral code as them. And I think that's why they're really big on tattling, because they think everybody should have the same rules as that they have, right? And then we have stage 3, 7 to 11 years old. They're thinking in more rational terms, concrete, operational thinking. They're also starting to understand conservation. Notice the con in concrete and the con in conservation. Conservation means that things could look different but be the same. For example, a pizza that's cut up into 8 slices is really the same amount of pizza as the same size pizza that's cut into 6 slices, right? But they might not understand that before they understand conservation. And then the formal operation stage is the last stage, 11 to 12 years, or maybe not even till 16 years old, that they're develop this ability to think abstractly and engage in hypothetic deductive reasoning, which is where they can make a hypothesis and evaluate possible outcomes. We want to teach respect for self, family, communities. So modeling that and reading books about that, give them examples and opportunities to share. So sometimes maybe you have enough supplies for every kid to have their own, but you plan activities where they have to share to encourage that, right? Following routines, that's going to make your classroom run more smoothly and help you teach more effectively too, because you'll have better classroom management. And show them how to work cooperatively in groups. Instructional practices. I don't spend a lot of time on this because you learn about this in your educator preparation program. But you want to take into account the stage of development that we talked about when you plan instruction. So you would never do abstract things for the lower grades because they can't think abstractly. You always want to use lots of manipulatives and hands-on activities for those lower grades. Always want to use technology in the classroom. Your district will probably have some recommended websites and resources. I know my district uses Nearpods, and we do that. But yours might do something different. And then the Handbook of Texas is a good resource for Texas history. Instructional strategies. Try to make it relevant to their own life, something they can apply. So when you're teaching economics and government systems, maybe have a class store where they can buy and sell things, right? When you're talking about government, do role plays where they can talk about what police officers, firefighters, and community members do to protect society. They love it if they can dress up and pretend, especially in those lower grades. All right, there's a difference between primary sources and original sources. So primary source is an original source of information. A secondary source was written after, and it's a document or source that relates information discussed elsewhere. We already talked about the social science disciplines. Anytime that I repeat something in the course, it's because they repeat it in the preparation manual. So when we teach history, we want to integrate these. We want to tie in history, economics, government, citizenship, culture, all of these things. So one way you could do that is if you're teaching about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, they could learn about the culture she grew up in and the history and economy at the time, slavery and everything like that. Then they could read some short stories about the economy and slavery, learn about the arms she used at the Combahee Ferry, freeing 700 slaves. That would be technology of weapons at the time, and discuss how she showed traits of good citizenship. Finally, they can use a graphic organizer to help them take notes. So see how I'm incorporating all of these domains of social studies into one lesson. So that's what we want to do. We also want to make interdisciplinary units where we connect science, social studies, and math. So one way I've seen a teacher do this that really helped was in a first grade class, I saw a teacher that did a unit on apples. And in social studies, they read about Johnny Appleseed and they wrote a reflection about it. So that was language arts. In math, they cut up apples with adult help, they didn't do it themselves, and made applesauce following an algorithm, a recipe. So that was math. And science, they learned about the life cycle of an apple tree, an apple seed turning into a tree and all of that. So she made it interdisciplinary, where she connected different subjects. You definitely have to know the different types of assessments. So formal assessments make students a little bit nervous, a quiz, a test, something like that. An informal assessment is maybe an exit ticket to show what you know. So you want to use both and see what students understand, because sometimes their anxiety kicks in and they don't do as well on a formal assessment, but really they know the material. So we use both. You also want to use formative assessments, which you give while you're still teaching a unit, and summative assessments, which you give at the end of a unit. You always want to meet the needs of all learners, right? Differentiated instruction. So struggling students, students that are on target, advanced students, students with different interests, different cultural backgrounds. You also want to give scaffolding, especially to English language learners, to help them reach the next level of proficiency by explaining things in a different way, using body language, gestures, things like that. Practical applications. So we want to show students current events when it's appropriate for them. And in upper elementary grades, they could learn about things like violence in other countries and how the governments either contribute or alleviate the problem. That wouldn't be good for lower grades, of course. Can talk about how governments and agencies use laws and protections to help the environment. We want to show them how to read maps and also how to create their own maps and do this online too. And then we always want to communicate with the community. So you want to invite in community members to do presentations or come talk to your class. You want to invite in parents and things like that. You want to have open house nights where you present stuff and talk about resources. You always want to keep in mind that FERPA is the privacy law, right? And you have to respect privacy and only share information with custodial parents or guardians. So if you don't know about FERPA yet, definitely do a quick Google search and read a little bit about FERPA, because I guarantee you, you're going to have to comply with FERPA if you're teaching. And you should have training. Your district should have training on that, but you want to make sure you're ready for that. So we've covered the whole competency. Let's look at a few questions, and y'all can put your answer in the chat box, and we'll see if we get them right. I'll select the answer that y'all pick, even if it's not right. See if anybody's answered yet. Not yet. No answers yet. Okay, we've got one. Let's see if we get another one. Okay, I'm seeing D. Now, what's tricky about this, you might not have noticed this. This is why I love to do this in tutoring. Notice it says select all that apply. So if I pick D, I'm going to get the whole question wrong. There's no partial credit in core subjects, right? So A, C, and D are correct. The pre-operation stage is the stage of development that children are usually in from 2 to 7 years old. Animism, moral realism, and symbolism are all typical traits. So even though we got part of it right, we don't get any credit for that. So that's why I love doing this at tutoring, where we practice and we learn from our mistakes before the stakes are high. Number 2. Yes, this one is B because that's kind of an abstract thinking, right? It doesn't maybe seem too abstract to me, and I actually think that a lot of kindergarten kids could do that. But the test says that that's an abstract way of thinking. If we look at the preparation manual, there's a similar question to this, and they consider that abstract thinking that they couldn't do. Let's look at this one too. So I'm seeing A, B, and A, B, and C. So I'll just do A, B, and we'll see what it says. A and B are correct. Primary sources are original sources of information. The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank was written by the person who experienced the events, which makes it an original source of information. A newspaper article about the Montgomery bus boycott would have been written immediately after the boycott became news. This makes it an original source of information. The other two options are secondary sources. Secondary sources relate information discussed elsewhere. An encyclopedia entry and a movie are both things that are written well after the events take place. So we did one whole competency. We did some practice questions. We talked about a little bit of data. We covered a lot tonight. I know it was really quick. If you are interested in trying my study material, let me show you a little bit more about it real quick. At the beginning of each competency, there's a video. At the end of each competency, there's a quiz, like what we just looked at, right? So every competency has a video for you to watch. It has all of the text for you to read, all of the quizzes, and then there's a final exam. So it basically has two full-length tests in it, right? So in case you want to sign up, I'll put the link in the chat box. So let me just get to the link. I have a lot of courses, so it's on the second page. And thank you guys for attending. I love tutoring, and I love creating courses and helping people reach their goals. So I think you'll find it helpful. I have heard from some people that have tried other programs before and have not been successful, and then they try mine and pass. I just heard from somebody that had struggled with the math and had tried lots of different programs. And he did it for a few months because he really had to work to get his math up, but he did it and passed. And then some people do it pretty quickly. It depends on where their starting point is and how much they study per day. But does anybody have any questions or comments or anything? No? Well, thank you guys so much. I hope you'll have a great night and I hope to see you again. I'll be doing this again soon, so please check for an email about the next session and take care. Bye. Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw your question. I do not have anything for 4 through 8 science, but are you still here? Let me see. Yes, you're still here. But I can tell you, I have bought this study guide for 4 through 8, and I passed the 4 through 8, and it helped me pass. They're nice people. I emailed the owners, and they're very nice people, and they have good material. It doesn't have, at least when I most recently bought it, which has been a little while, they didn't have videos and practice questions, but their content is spot on and it's very affordable because they don't have all of those other things. So I think that's a good way to pass. 240 tutoring, I've bought that and it's good, but I feel like it's overwhelming for most people. That's what I hear consistently. It's overwhelming and they have a lot of stuff on there that's not going to be on the test, but it is a good program. So you can't really go wrong if you like 240. It's a good one, but I like Pass to Texas because I feel like it's faster and it's good. So and they have stuff for lots of different tests. So they recommend me if they don't have what I have, and I recommend them. So it works out well. But I hope y'all have a great What information would you like me to send? The website, I put it in the chat box.
Okay.
Yes, I'll put it again so it comes up
Okay.
most recently. It's just past the texas.com, but Texas like the exam, not the state.
Okay.
Uh, but I hope y'all have a great night and I will see y'all hopefully soon. Thank you.
Thank you.